My name is Marcus Whitman. I am 49 years old, and I've worked as a strip mine reclamation specialist for the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection for 14 years, restoring abandoned coal mining sites throughout the central Appalachian Mountains to functional ecosystems and safe environmental conditions. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you are watching from, please. West Virginia contains over 2,000 abandoned surface mining sites, requiring environmental restoration under the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act. My job involves soil analysis, revegetation planning, water quality monitoring, and slope stabilization at former strip mining operations scattered throughout remote mountain areas, often accessible only by four-wheel drive vehicles. This happened last June during restoration work at the former Kayford Mountain surface mining operation in Kanawha County, West Virginia, about 25 miles southeast of Charleston. The site had been inactive since 1989 and required comprehensive environmental restoration, including soil replacement, acid mine drainage control, and native vegetation establishment across 280 acres of disturbed mountain terrain. I arrived at the site around 7 a.m. with my reclamation truck loaded with soil testing equipment, surveying instruments, and vegetation planning supplies. The former mining operation covered several mountain ridges connected by haul roads that remained passable for accessing different restoration areas. Kayford Mountain surface mine was typical for Central Appalachian strip mining. Terraced benches carved into mountainsides, exposed high wall faces, and spoil piles requiring extensive environmental remediation. My assignment involved evaluating soil conditions across the entire site to develop comprehensive revegetation plans. Around 10:30 a.m., while conducting soil tests on the upper bench area at approximately 2,200 feet elevation, I discovered something that violated fundamental physical laws. Gravity was functioning incorrectly throughout a 15-acre section of the former mining site. Not reduced gravity or increased gravity, wrong gravity. Objects were falling at normal speed, but in directions that didn't correspond to Earth's gravitational pull. I dropped my soil testing probe and watched it fall sideways across level ground, then curve upward before hitting a vertical high wall, as if that direction represented down. Water from my testing equipment flowed uphill along what should have been level surfaces, pooled against vertical rock faces, and formed standing pools on steep slopes, where it should have immediately drained downhill. Rain puddles from previous days were positioned on vertical surfaces, as if those surfaces were horizontal ground. I've worked mountainous terrain throughout West Virginia for 14 years. I understand slope gradients, drainage patterns, how gravity affects soil erosion and water flow on disturbed mining sites. What I observed defied every principle of physics and engineering that governs reclamation work. My surveying equipment confirmed the terrain was sloped normally. Level areas were level, steep areas were steep, but within this specific 15-acre zone, gravity operated as if down was oriented in multiple random directions simultaneously. Objects fell toward different surfaces depending on where they were released. I tested the phenomenon systematically. Soil samples dropped near the eastern edge fell toward the vertical high wall. Samples dropped in the center area fell upward toward overhanging rock ledges. Samples released near the western boundary fell sideways across supposedly level ground until hitting obstacles. Water behavior was equally impossible. I poured water from my testing kit and watched it flow in streams that curved upward along vertical rock faces, formed pools that hung suspended on steep slopes, and created standing water that defied every drainage principle essential for successful mine reclamation. The gravity anomaly zone had precise boundaries. I could step from normal gravitational effects into the affected area within a single footstep. On one side, dropped objects fell down normally. On the other side, they fell toward random directions that changed based on precise location within the zone. For over 3 hours, I documented the impossible gravitational conditions using my surveying equipment and photography. The anomaly zone remained consistent. Objects always fell in the same wrong direction from any specific location, as if gravity had been permanently reoriented throughout that area. Around 2 p.m., the gravitational anomalies ended abruptly. All objects immediately began falling normally downward, according to standard gravitational pull. Water resumed flowing downhill along proper drainage patterns. The 15-acre zone returned to normal physics within minutes. I found all the objects that had fallen in wrong directions now positioned where they would have landed under normal gravity. Water that had pooled on vertical surfaces had redistributed to appropriate low-lying areas. The landscape showed no evidence of the 3-hour period when gravity had operated incorrectly. When I submitted my reclamation site report to the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection, I documented the gravitational anomalies as unusual site conditions requiring further geophysical analysis. Depth geologists reviewed my photographs and measurements but found no mechanism to explain localized gravitational reorientation. I contacted other reclamation specialists working throughout the Appalachian coal mining region. Several mentioned brief periods during site surveys when objects seemed to fall in unexpected directions, instances where water drainage didn't follow predicted patterns, occasions where standard surveying measurements didn't match observed gravitational effects. One reclamation engineer from Kentucky described working a former surface mining site where his equipment consistently fell toward a vertical coal seam face, instead of downhill, making standard surveying procedures impossible for nearly an hour before conditions returned to normal. Another specialist from Virginia reported a day when all standing water on a reclamation site seemed positioned incorrectly for the terrain slope, as if water had pooled according to different gravitational orientation than what the landscape should have produced. The indigenous peoples who lived in the Appalachian Mountains before large-scale coal mining have traditional knowledge about mountain spirits and land disturbance. According to their teachings, mountains remember everything done to them, and sometimes disturbed land experiments with different ways of existing as it heals from extraction damage. I continue mine reclamation work throughout West Virginia, because environmental restoration of former mining sites is essential for ecosystem recovery and community safety. But I am different now during site surveys on remote mountain reclamation projects, when gravity operates according to multiple different orientations within specific zones. When water flows and object movement violate standard physics for hours before returning to normal. When disturbed mountain terrain demonstrates gravitational behavior that challenges fundamental assumptions about how physical laws operate consistently. I document everything thoroughly, and I understand that Appalachian mountain environments, despite extensive geological study related to coal extraction and environmental restoration, have the ability to temporarily alter fundamental physical forces in ways that suggest disturbed land may experiment with different gravitational orientations during healing processes. That mountain, damaged by surface mining, can test alternative physical conditions as part of environmental recovery, demonstrating through impossible gravitational behavior that restoration involves more than soil replacement and vegetation establishment, requiring recognition that damaged mountain environments may need to experiment with different ways of existing before settling into stable physical conditions suitable for long-term ecological recovery. Former surface mining sites throughout the Appalachian Mountains represent some of the most dramatically altered landscapes in North America, with mountain ecosystems requiring decades of restoration work to achieve environmental stability. Perfect locations for landscape experimentation with fundamental physical forces during healing processes. And based on what I documented that June afternoon and reports from other reclamation specialists, something does exist within disturbed Appalachian mountain environments that can temporarily reorient gravitational effects during restoration processes, that allows damaged land to experiment with different physical orientations as part of healing from extraction trauma, and that demonstrates through impossible gravitational behavior that environmental recovery from severe landscape disturbance involves more than technical restoration procedures, requiring damaged mountain environments to test alternative physical conditions before achieving stable gravitational orientation suitable for supporting restored ecosystems and long-term mental recovery.
My name is Vincent Calloway. I am 52 years old, and I've worked as a mountain rescue coordinator for the Appalachian Search and Rescue Conference for 16 years, managing emergency response operations throughout the remote wilderness areas of West Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee, where thousands of hikers, hunters, and outdoor enthusiasts require assistance annually. This happened last September during a missing person search operation in the Monongahela National Forest near Seneca Rocks in Pendleton County, West Virginia. A family of 4 hikers had failed to return from a day hike on the North Fork Mountain Trail, and their vehicle was found at the Seneca Rocks parking area after they missed their scheduled check in time. Mountain rescue operations in the Appalachian wilderness require coordinating multiple volunteer search teams, establishing communication networks across terrain that often blocks radio signals, and managing logistics for searches that can extend over hundreds of square miles of remote mountain forest. I arrived at the Seneca Rocks Visitor Center around 6 p.m. to establish incident command for the search operation. The missing family, parents, and 2 teenage children from Pittsburgh had permits for a day hike to the North Fork Mountain overlook, approximately 8 miles round, trip through well-marked but challenging terrain. Weather conditions were favorable with clear skies and mild temperatures, but darkness would limit search effectiveness within 2 hours. I deployed 6 volunteer search teams to cover different sections of the trail system, each team equipped with GPS tracking, emergency medical supplies, and radio communication equipment. Around 8:30 p.m., while coordinating search team positions from the incident command post, I experienced something unprecedented in 16 years of mountain rescue operations. All 6 search teams, operating in different locations throughout the forest, began exhibiting identical behavior patterns simultaneously. Not coordinated behavior, identical behavior. Team Alpha, searching the lower North Fork Trail, reported finding a section of trail that appeared to continue uphill, despite their topographic maps indicating level terrain. Team Beta, working the ridge system 3 miles north, reported finding an identical trail section that appeared to continue uphill despite level topographic indication. Team Charlie, searching the western drainage area, reported their compasses pointing to magnetic north in directions that didn't correspond to actual magnetic declination. Teams Delta, Echo, and Foxtrot, positioned in completely separate areas of the forest, all reported identical compass anomalies at exactly the same time. I've coordinated hundreds of search operations throughout Appalachian wilderness areas. Search teams work independently based on assigned areas and terrain conditions. Teams don't experience identical equipment problems simultaneously, unless there is major electromagnetic interference affecting the entire region. Within 30 minutes, all 6 teams reported identical navigation difficulties that made no sense for their separate locations. Each team found trail markers that didn't match their assigned search areas, discovered terrain features that contradicted their topographic maps, and encountered navigation equipment that provided identical incorrect readings, despite working in different watersheds and elevation zones. Team leaders are experienced mountaineers familiar with Appalachian wilderness navigation. They don't make simultaneous identical mistakes about basic trail finding and compass use. Yet every team was reporting the same navigation problems: trails leading uphill where maps showed level terrain, magnetic compass readings that pointed in wrong directions, and landscape features positioned differently than indicated by surveyed topographic maps. At 9:15 p.m., all teams reported simultaneously that they'd found the missing family, not different groups of people. Each team insisted they'd located the same Pittsburgh family of 4 hikers in their respective search areas, despite teams being positioned miles apart throughout different sections of the forest. I coordinated with team leaders using radio communication to verify their findings. Each team described identical details about the missing family. Parents appeared unharmed but confused. Teenage children were tired but not injured. Family had adequate gear and supplies, and they claimed to have been hiking normally without getting lost or experiencing difficulties. According to standard search protocol, I dispatched teams to verify each claimed rescue and coordinate extraction to the incident command post. But as teams attempted to guide the rescued families out of the forest, each group discovered they were alone. No family members accompanied them, despite clear recent interaction with 4 hikers matching the missing person's description. The family confirmed they'd remained in the shelter location since late afternoon and had not encountered any search personnel until Team Delta's actual discovery. They had no awareness of being found by multiple teams or any mysterious disappearances from search team assistance. The Appalachian Mountain wilderness contains thousands of square miles of remote terrain where search operations require extensive coordination among volunteer teams working independently across challenging landscape conditions. Perfect environment for collective rescue team behavior that ensures comprehensive search coverage. And based on what I experienced during that September search operation and subsequent reports from other coordinators, something does exist within Appalachian Mountain wilderness that can create identical behavior patterns among separate search teams to ensure thorough rescue operations that influences multiple teams simultaneously to guarantee comprehensive coverage of potential missing person locations, and that teaches through synchronized team experiences that mountain rescue success requires verification of all rescue claims and understanding that wilderness environments may actively participate in rescue operations by influencing search team behavior to ensure missing persons receive proper assistance, and rescue teams maintain rigorous verification procedures during emergency response operations. My name is Clayton Burke. I am 44 years old, and I've worked as a power line inspector for American Electric Power for 12 years, maintaining and monitoring electrical transmission infrastructure throughout the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia and Virginia, where high-voltage power lines traverse some of the most remote and challenging mountain terrain in the eastern United States. This happened last October during a routine inspection of the Amos, Cabin Creek, 765 kV transmission line that runs through Lincoln County, West Virginia, between the John Amos Power Plant near Winfield and the Cabin Creek substation. The line spans approximately 45 miles of mountainous terrain, including several remote areas accessible only by 4-wheel-drive vehicles and hiking trails. Power line inspection in Appalachian terrain requires specialized equipment for accessing transmission towers positioned on mountain ridges, checking conductor conditions, and monitoring right-of-way vegetation management. My truck carries infrared temperature monitoring devices, binoculars, photography equipment, and safety gear for climbing transmission structures when detailed inspection is required. I left the Amos plant around 7 a.m. following maintenance roads that parallel the transmission line through increasingly remote mountain areas. The inspection route would take me along approximately 20 miles of line, checking each transmission tower and monitoring equipment, with particular attention to areas where recent storms might have caused conductor damage or vegetation encroachment. Weather conditions were clear and cool, typical October morning in the West Virginia mountains, with good visibility for observing conductor conditions and identifying potential maintenance issues. The first several towers showed normal operation with no apparent problems, requiring immediate attention. Around 11:15 a.m., while inspecting Tower 47 near the head of Draughty Creek Hollow in a particularly remote section of Lincoln County, I observed something that challenged every principle of landscape permanence and geological stability I'd learned in 12 years of mountain power line work. The mountain terrain was displaying different historical periods simultaneously across the transmission line corridor. Not archaeological evidence or historical artifacts. The landscape itself was showing different time periods of its own development in adjacent areas along the power line route. To the north of Tower 47, the mountainside showed virgin, old-growth forest that had never been logged, with massive chestnut trees that died out from blight in the 1930s, but appeared healthy and thriving. The forest extended up the ridge exactly as it would have existed before European settlement in the region. To the south of the same tower, the landscape showed early 20th century clear, cut logging operations in active progress, stumps and slash piles from recent timber harvest, skid roads carved into the mountainside, and logging debris scattered across terrain that appeared freshly harvested, despite no current logging activity in this area. Directly under the transmission line, the terrain showed modern strip mining operations that had never occurred at this location. Exposed coal seams, mining equipment, access roads, and the terraced bench cuts typical of surface mining appeared across areas that had never been surface mined according to DEP records and coal company permit maps. I've inspected power lines throughout coal country for 12 years. I know the difference between current land use, historical disturbance, and natural forest conditions. I understand mining permits, logging history, and land use patterns throughout central West Virginia. What I observed were simultaneous landscape conditions representing different historical periods that shouldn't be visible together. Using my inspection binoculars, I could see all three landscape conditions clearly and simultaneously: virgin forest, active logging, and strip mining operations existing in adjacent areas along a single transmission line corridor. Each landscape condition appeared completely real and current, not historical recreation or archaeological interpretation. The virgin forest showed wildlife that had been extinct in West Virginia for decades. American chestnut trees in full health, elk moving through understory that hadn't existed since early settlement, bird species that hadn't nested in these mountains since before widespread logging began. The logging operations showed work crews and equipment that appeared active and current, with men and horses working timber harvest, using methods and equipment typical of 1910s. Era logging, steam, powered equipment, crosscut saws, and logging techniques that hadn't been used in these mountains for nearly a century. Within 20 minutes, the entire transmission corridor showed current landscape conditions. Second, growth forest, typical of previously logged Appalachian Mountains, with no evidence of the simultaneous historical periods I'd observed. The landscape matched current topographic maps and known land use history. The Appalachian Mountains contain some of the most extensively altered landscapes in North America, with mountain terrain that has experienced logging, mining, agriculture, and infrastructure development across multiple centuries of intensive human land use. Perfect environment for landscape memory manifestation that displays complete environmental history. And based on what I observed during that October power line inspection and reports from other infrastructure workers, something does exist within Appalachian mountain terrain that can simultaneously display all historical periods of landscape development, that allows mountains to show their complete memory of environmental change, and that demonstrates through impossible historical manifestation that current mountain landscapes reflect centuries of cumulative human impact, making it clear through simultaneous historical display that understanding mountain environments requires recognition of all previous land use and development that has shaped current landscape conditions, teaching through temporary historical manifestation that mountain terrain carries permanent memory of all human interaction and environmental change that continues to influence current ecological and geological conditions.